Siapa yang mencoba? Tiga dicoba. Satu. Satu dicoba. 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 Satu. Satu dicoba. Dicoba. Satu. Satu dicoba. Satu. Satu dicoba. Dicoba. Satu. Dicoba. Kurang kencang. Cek satu. 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 Satu, dua, tiga, dicoba. 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 Satu, dua, tiga, dicoba. 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 Cek satu. Satu, dua, tiga. Satu. Satu, dua, cek satu satu. Cek satu satu dua.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Selamat pagi semuanya. Good morning everyone. Good morning Prof. Michael. Ya. Terima kasih kepada Bapak Ibu yang sudah berkenan hadir kembali pada hari kedua dalam rangkaian acara PhD Kandidat Workshop Strategies for Publishing in International Journal with Prof. Michael Hitchcock Ph.D. from Oxford and Goldsmiths University of London. Di hari kedua ini kita memiliki 4 presenter dan nanti di siang hari kita akan closing beserta pembagian sertifikat yang akan dilakukan oleh Prof. Windu. Jadi pertama-tama izinkan saya untuk menginformasikan untuk acara hari ini. Jadi kita akan mulai tepat pukul 9 saat ini sampai dengan jam 10.30 dengan 2 presenter. Lalu sampai dengan 10.45 kita akan coffee break sejenak. Dan 10.45 sampai dengan jam 12:15 kita akan kembali bersama 2 presenter. Dan pada pukul 12.15 sampai dengan 13 adalah lunch and prayer. Kemudian setelah makan siang kita akan kembali di sini untuk closing bersama dengan Prof. Windu. Untuk itu sebelumnya saya akan perkenalkan bahwa hari ini akan ada 4 presenter. Yang pertama adalah Bapak Ahmad Saifuddin Mutaki. Selamat datang di GM, Bapak. Yang nanti akan membawakan, mempresentasikan tentang Integration of Digital Thinking and Design Thinking for Future Heritage. Dan yang kedua ada Ibu Kurnia Widyastuti dengan Defining Experimental Pragmatism Insight for Architecture, Context and the Future. Dan yang ketiga ada Ibu Diana Ayudya yang akan membawakan The Morphology of Urban Tourism Space, Case Study Case Malioboro Main Street as Cosmological Axis of Yogyakarta City. Dan yang terakhir ada Bapak Gun Faisal yang akan mempresentasikan tentang The Ritual of Upah-Upah as a Determinant of the Indoor Spatial Setting of a Traditional Malay House in Rokan Hulu, Riau, Indonesia. Tanpa membuang waktu lebih lama lagi, kita sambut untuk presenter pertama, Bapak Ahmad Saifuddin Mutaki, yang akan kita berikan waktu presentasi antara 10 sampai 20 menit, Bapak, dan kemudian Prof. Hitchcock akan memberikan feedback. Dipersilakan.
Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, sehat untuk kita semuanya. Perkenalkan, saya Ahmad Saifuddin Mutaki. Saya lulusan UGM S1, S2, lalu saya meneruskan S3 saya di Unika, Universitas Katolik Sugih Pranata. Ya, jadi bagi yang belum kenal, mungkin saya bekerja di UII, Universitas Islam Indonesia. Kebetulan mengawali sekolah itu sejak, jadi sampai hari ini kalau dihitung sudah 37 tahun. Maka sebetulnya mungkin nanti 3 tahun ke depan saya sudah pensiun. Ini saya sampaikan karena saya yakin yang duduk di sini adalah mungkin ada di antaranya murid saya dulu waktu S1. Karena beberapa mahasiswa lulusan arsitektur sudah jadi profesor. Jadi saya ini ibaratnya kalau orang Jawa bilang kebun nusu gudel, begitulah kira-kira. Tapi tetap semangat. Mudah-mudahan saya bisa sehat terus sehingga bisa saya selesaikan sekolah ini. Sedikit cerita tentang beberapa pengalaman penulisan. Saya sampai hari ini artikel itu baru bisa tembus Sinta paling tinggi, Sinta 2 paling tinggi. Jadi saya belum pernah berhasil mendapatkan jurnal yang terindeks Scopus. Sehingga ketika ada judul Strategies for Publishing in International Journal, wah ini menarik, ini judulnya strategi. Jadi saya anggap mungkin tulisan saya ini nanti akan mendapatkan banyak masukan, lalu saya bisa submit ke jurnal yang terindeks Scopus begitu. Saya pengalaman terakhir workshop seperti ini juga menghasilkan satu tulisan juga dan sudah saya submit di Springer begitu dan sudah mendapatkan komentar input balik dari para reviewer, blind reviewer begitu, 4 orang begitu. Tapi sudah resubmit lagi, tapi ya sekali lagi sampai hari ini belum ada hasilnya. Artinya sudah 6 bulan tulisan saya yang sudah direview 4 orang di sustainable energy belum bisa terbit begitu. Tapi begitulah memang. Mudah-mudahan yang ini kali ini bersama Profesor Michael Hitchcock, itu mudah-mudahan bisa berhasil. Nah, saya masuk ke materi saya. Konon di dalam membuat judul itu harus yang menarik begitu. Jadi apakah itu betul juga tidak tahu. So saya membuat judul World Heritage Under Threat, gitu. Integrating digital and design thinking for sustainable preservation. Poinnya bahwa World Heritage yang dihargai oleh masyarakat kita, community itu dalam keadaan terancam. Jadi face growing threat from natural disaster, armed conflict, and incentive development. Jadi problematika bencana alam, lalu peperangan, dan pembangunan nasional dalam tanda petik itu betul-betul kadang-kadang menjadi persoalan besar. So this paper identify the specific vulnerabilities facing Indonesian cultural heritage site, highlighting the lack of integrated approach. Jadi memang ada persoalan dengan bagaimana itu semua tidak terintegrasi dengan baik gitu. While research testing on digital preservation and design thinking for heritage, non-explore their combined potensial. Jadi sudah begitu banyak riset-riset yang berbasis digital untuk prestasi konservasi maupun desain begitu, tapi belum pernah ada yang mengkombinasikannya, yang menggabungkan. Jadi mungkin itu ide dasar dari apa yang saya pikirkan. So this study proposed a novel framework that integrate digital thinking concept with comprehensive interpretative design thinking to develop a sustainable approach for future cultural heritage preservation. Jadi itulah yang mungkin menjadi penting untuk saya ajukan. And this integrated approach aim to safeguard heritage and unlock its potential societal and environmental well-being. Jadi poinnya bahwa dengan cara mengintegrasikan ini tidak hanya soal menjadikan heritage itu lebih baik begitu, tetapi juga secara sosial dan lingkungan akan menjadi lebih bagus begitu. Nah, riset ini karena ini merupakan bagian dari riset besar, jadi yang kali ini saya melakukannya dengan literatur review dan ya, jadi harapannya berbasis literatur review yang ada, kita akan mendapatkan a robust knowledge based on cultural heritage preservation, recognition of its future value, developing accessible, impactful heritage experience. Nah, jadi gambaran umumnya kira-kira seperti itu. Introduction saya akan memulai dengan kita tahu heritage di Indonesia tadi saya katakan bahwa Indonesia di area yang fragile dengan natural disaster gitu. Nah, di sini disebutkan Gunung Merapi, Mount Merapi eruption ini banyak menimbulkan persoalan dengan heritage kita. Lalu persoalan-persoalan yang timbul dengan adanya peperangan di Middle East gitu ya. Ini juga persoalan timbul kerusakan heritage luar biasa. Dan tidak dilupakan incentive development project and economic priorities can further jeopardize heritage preservation. Jadi ini juga persoalan besar. Nah, in this digital age, can technology offer a lifeline? Jadi mudah di masa ini kira-kira teknologi bisa menjawab persoalan ini. This research explored potential of integrating digital thinking and design thinking to create robust future-proof approach to cultural heritage preservation. By analyzing the limitation of current method and learning from devastating impact of the past losses, we can harness the power of digitalization to safeguard our shared human heritage. Ya, jadi harapannya kira-kira seperti itu. Saya gambarkan lagi masuk ke wilayah Indonesia yang berada di Ring of Fire, yang itu banyak menimbulkan persoalan, mulai dari tsunami dan sebagainya. Kemudian saya menggiringnya lagi pada kasus-kasus erupsi mati yang mengubur banyak heritage, banyak situs-situs purbakala. Nah, ini saya berfokus pada situs purbakala yang kemudian nanti akan dihadapkan dengan situasi proses perencanaan pembangunan infrastruktur yang luar biasa. Ya, anggaplah kita tahu ada kasus jalan tol begitu, dan kemudian ini menjadi persoalan. Nah, sehingga pertanyaan, how can the integration of digital thinking and design thinking contribute to the sustainable preservation of buried Hindu temple during a large infrastructure development project? Nah, ini pertanyaan yang harus terjawab di dalam riset ini. Nah, lalu berikutnya saya mencoba menawarkan tentang spatial planning, conflict arise when infrastructure development needs intersect with cultural heritage area. Jadi begitulah peristiwanya. This conflict are exacerbated by unexpected discoveries of culture heritage during construction. Jadi ini persoalan yang luar biasa. Lalu kemudian timbulnya gagasan-gagasan yang umum menjadikan floating toll road technology. Mereka melakukan dengan cara itu. Tapi kemudian pertanyaannya banyak kerusakan yang terjadi. Lalu justru bagaimana kita menawarkan integrating digital and design thinking with 3D heritage BIM, jadi building information modeling simulation is a promising approach to support decision making in several contexts. Saya kira justru dengan HBIM, heritage BIM ini bisa memberikan banyak solusi. Nah, apakah itu kemudian menjadi solusi juga bagi persoalan ini? Saya masuk ke material and method. Material and method, the review will be categorized in 4 main terms, yaitu digital thinking approach, digital design thinking approach, 3D heritage BIM simulation, dan value integration benefit. Nah, saya kemudian masuk ke kajian mengenai masing-masing. Digital thinking approach itu apa saja yang di pengalaman dari kajian literaturnya. Digital technology has been used to support cultural heritage preservation, terbukti, dan ketika government experience difficulties in carrying out pure physical preservation, jadi ketika kota-kota di ASEAN juga mengalami persoalan membangun karena dihadapkan dengan biaya dan sebagainya, solusinya digital. Kemudian di masa pandemi, tourism sector lost many tourists to visit museum in mainland Europe. Ini juga solusinya dengan digital. So the role of digital technology is supporting conservation program is very promising. Dan kemudian digital 3D cultural heritage modeling (HBIM) will be able to convey tangible and intangible historical value required by stakeholder. Nah, di sini mulai masuk peran stakeholder. Kemudian saya mencoba untuk melihat di Indonesia sudah seperti apa, yang merujuk pada UNESCO, di mana cultural heritage is currently generally agreed internationally to include tangible, intangible heritage, as well as environmental. Saya kira ini penting. Lalu piagam pelestarian pusaka Indonesia atau kesepakatan Kyoto itu juga sepakat dengan itu, bahwa cultural heritage and natural heritage are now collectively referred to as cultural heritage in unity of space and time. Dan kemudian the principle of preservation is to keep things in good condition while enhancing them with the benefit of future inheritance. Nah, jadi gambaran itulah secara umum bagaimana di Indonesia sudah punya Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity. Beberapa keputusan pemerintah juga positif, menjadikan candi-candi itu sebagai tempat untuk worship, place of worship for Hindu and Buddhist. On the other hand, these sites are used as a tourist destination, or mostly for cultural tourism and historical research purposes. Nah, ini memang problemnya. Nanti kita akan tahu di berbagai tempat problem tourism itu selalu masifnya masyarakat yang datang, turis yang datang, dan seterusnya. Nah, jadi kira-kira seperti itulah yang saya coba kembangkan. Saya mungkin tidak akan menceritakan semuanya, dari masing-masing tema sudah saya masukkan, termasuk bagaimana sebetulnya pendekatan desain itu dilakukan, termasuk concern-nya terhadap prinsip desain itu apa, empathy and user-centered design, kemudian iteration and prototyping, lalu sustainable and inclusive solution. Kemudian ini beberapa poin-poin yang belum saya tuliskan. 3D Heritage BIM Solution hanya poin saja, create a detailed and accurate model, simulation, construction, and operation, dan yang penting juga cost estimation and feasibility analysis. Jadi kita bisa akan menjawab secara keseluruhan. Nah, yang diuntungkan tentu informed decision making bagi para pengambil keputusan penting sekali, stakeholder engagement, sustainability and cultural preservation, and efficiency of cost optimization. Diskusi yang bisa kita kembangkan, tantangannya apa, keterbatasannya seperti apa, tentu dihadapkan dengan data availability and quality, technical expertise, dan stakeholder buy-in. Dan satu lagi, ethical consideration. Nah, overall, integrating digital and design thinking with 3D HBIM simulation or the powerful approach to navigate complex spatial planning challenges, balancing infrastructure development with the cultural heritage preservation. Conclusionnya, in conclusion, this research explore the potential of integrating digital approach and design thinking for cultural heritage preservation in context of spatial planning and challenges. By analyzing this study, we found the dialogue, community participant impacted, and awareness increase. These findings suggest that the process of development and preservation of cultural heritage should be mutually supportive. Even though there are limitations such as limited approach to construction project, this research show ability to look at the problem holistically. Further, research can investigate the meaning of sustainability in cultural preservation with an architectural approach. Jadi disertasi saya itu seputar the meaning of sustainable in cultural preservation with an architectural approach. And ultimately, the adoption of innovative approach such as digital and design thinking promises to protect cultural heritage while ensuring inclusive and sustainable solution for future generation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, good. Thank you very much for that presentation. Just a little tip for all of you. If you're using Bahasa Indonesia, when you have a foreigner who speaks Indonesian, follow his example, because I can understand his Indonesian 100%. Because he announces his words in Indonesian very clearly, and also he speaks slowly. Some of you speak very fast, and he's using very good grammatical Indonesian. I have no problem. I understand Indonesian grammar absolutely, but I can understand you. So I thank you for that. That was, I understood both the English and the Indonesian 100%. Okay. Okay. This is a very, very timely piece of research, because of course, understanding the state of knowledge in this area, threats to World Heritage Sites, and doing a literature review like this is very, very useful. So I've got lots of things to say, actually, because for those of you who may have looked up my profile, you'll see that I've written quite a lot on UNESCO and on the history of UNESCO, and on also UNESCO sites in Indonesia. So actually, you've got an audience here who knows quite a lot about the subject, which is both good and maybe not so good. Okay, first of all, you're using the term literature review, and when in fact what you're actually doing is what we would call desk research, because it gives you a little bit more flexibility. If you say literature review, it would imply that you're looking at published sources in online published sources of a particular kind. Whereas if you say desk research, it gives you a bit more freedom, because I think into this you can actually, if you keep it focused on Indonesia, which I think you should do, you can bring in not things that are written about threats, but I think you can engage with policy. Yeah, because you've got policy from UNESCO, and you've got policy from the Indonesian government. Now, the key that you're talking about is integration. This is the key that everybody's talking about, because nothing is ever integrated in this world. It's so difficult. So I would say maybe use desk research, but certainly mention literature review, because that means that, and I would consult policy sources so that you have something to demonstrate about what the policy framework is. I'll give you an example of this. I also work as a consultant in the heritage area. Let's say if I'm doing a consulting for the Chinese government, okay? If I do not put in policy number so-and-so, policy number so-and-so, and what it says, I will not get paid. It's as simple as that, because the Chinese government wants to know how I have engaged. Now, as it happens, in the heritage area and the tourism area, engaging with Chinese policy is actually quite okay. You know, everything's something sinister or something. It's not. So I would say that you should, in this consideration, have a consideration of UNESCO policy and Indonesian policy. And I think you also need a historical dimension. How did the UNESCO World Heritage Convention come into being? And I want to say this to you, all of you here, because we're in a very important heritage city. The World Heritage Office in Paris is Kachilskali. It has no power. It is only an idea. Now, most people around the world think the World Heritage Convention is something incredibly powerful, incredibly meaningful. You've got a little group of people in an office in Paris. That's all. That's all you have. And you know what? When I started writing critically about UNESCO, they were quite amused because they actually say, we don't know half the problems. So what you're talking about is something that ultimately could find a market in Paris because they do not know, because there's so few of them. And so they do not know what's going on. That's a fact. How can you expect 6 or 7 people to know what's going on in the world of heritage? So I would have something on the build-up to your research, which is why did the World Heritage Convention come into being? How has it been implemented? And how has it been criticized? Because on the 30th anniversary of the World Heritage Convention, I organized a conference to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the World Heritage Convention. We produced a book, and that book is incredibly critical of UNESCO for not knowing what it's doing. And I think, given your topic, I think you should have a fully developed critical framework. That doesn't mean that UNESCO gets upset. They don't. Actually, they're very thankful because they just simply don't know. So I would start reading the critical literature on UNESCO and start with my book, The Politics of World Heritage. Also, from that, read the bibliography. Read also the Dutch writers, the British writers, because these people are very critical of exactly the issues. So World Heritage under threat, it's always been under threat. That's why the World Heritage Convention came into being, was to address the threat. The very threats that you're talking about are very real, and they've been trying their best, but sometimes they don't succeed. So I would start, before you even get on to your digital review, I would go to Google Scholar and follow up bibliographies and find out what the issues are. And you'll find a good place to start will be my book with David Harrison. There's lots of essays there. Now, given an Indonesian context, and you mentioned stakeholders, I would say probably the best stakeholder analysis of the problem of World Heritage Sites is actually written by me and Professor Inyoman Dharmaputra from Universitas Udayana. We have done a study of Besaki. Now, why Besaki? Because Besaki did not become a World Heritage Site. You can learn a lot by places that do not want World Heritage Sites. Besaki, they thought it was not a good idea. So read that, because that's a question of where stakeholders sometimes don't want to be World Heritage Site. Now, also in your build-up to your work, I think you ought to go into the whole complex issue of etymology, the meaning of words, because let me just tell you something about the English language. The English language is a very mixed language. It's one of the reasons, give you an example, German people get very confused because German belongs to Germany. Now, we have an erratic language with spelling. It's not logical. So Germans say, why don't you just change it? Make it logical. We can't do that. Why can't you do that? Because English doesn't belong to us. It belongs to everybody, because it is actually, it grew from being a mixed language to being a global language, and we cannot streamline it or anything like that. It just belongs. So the interesting thing is to look at, what does heritage mean? Now, heritage is actually a word of French origin, héritage. Héritage. Now, most people speaking English won't realize that. They don't notice when there's French words. Incidentally, there are Indonesian words in English. There are Indian words in English, Arabic words in English. You name it, it's in English. So go into the definitions, and then in particular, go into what is meant by heritage in the Indonesian context. What does it really mean? Now, I don't believe there is such a thing as exact translation, because you're conveying lots of cultural knowledge. So the Indonesian word is warisan. What does warisan mean? I think we should actually go into this and have a discussion on what is meant by heritage, what is meant by warisan, and does that influence the way that people look at the World Heritage Convention? Because remember, I'm going to introduce you to the idea of the gaze, G-A-Z-E, not gaze as in gaze in a sexual nature, but gaze as, the gaze is a cultural thing. It's how we look on the world. And Indonesians have a very different gaze on what is heritage to, for example, someone in Britain. I'll give you an example. If you go heritage in Japan, because a lot of the heritage in Japan is made of wood, the ancient buildings that you see are not ancient because they've been repaired. Yeah. Okay. Now, someone from England, because we don't have that kind of climate, we use a lot of hardwood and stone. We don't.
Yeah.
So you could say that our notion of
Assalamualaikum.
So our notion of heritage. Now, what the Japanese say is it's a bit like hardware and software. We in Britain have a hardware notion of heritage, i.e. it's the material. And the Japanese say that they have a software notion of heritage, i.e. it is the skills, the idea, the human ingenuity. The heritage is here, not there. In England, the heritage is there, maybe here. So I think you need to have a very interesting discussion as to exactly what heritage means in the Indonesian context, because I think that could be very interesting, because if you're talking about threats, it's threats to what? Actually, Japanese are not so bothered about threats because they carry the knowledge in their heads, okay? In England, we're very worried about tsunamis because we're by the sea, because we don't really carry the knowledge in our heads. It's actually in the built environment. So I would spend a bit of time on that. Now, one of the things that you're going to have to do is I don't have a problem with your methodology, but you're going to have to justify it, because somebody can criticize your research and call it what's called convenience research. You don't have to go anywhere. Sit in front of a screen. You don't have to get like me in Borobudur 2 days ago. I got sweaty and hot and tired and everything else like that. So field workers will say, hey, you're doing convenience research. You're a desk, you're an armchair researcher taking it easy in air conditioning. So what you need to do is to justify it. Now, I often have a problem because actually I'm very well aware that digital approaches to heritage are extremely important. And in fact, we will see them becoming more important. And I've been trying to stress this. Indonesia needs a digital revolution. It needs a digital revolution in all kinds of ways. First of all, you need to talk about interpretation, the use of digital technologies in interpreting heritage, also in tourism management. Because at the moment, Indonesia does not make use of digital technologies in these areas. So, heritage management. So there's a sideline to your thesis, which I think could be very, very, very useful. You mentioned sort of a global context, but I'd be inclined to keep it to Indonesia or even narrow it down. And I would tend to do that because it's just going to make your thesis, if you do it general, you're going to find yourself people saying, it's not quite like that in Egypt. It's not quite like that in Thailand, if you know what I mean. So better maybe to stick to Indonesia. The 3D heritage scheme theme, that's also very interesting. And I think that is going to be very important in Indonesia because we can make copies. We can make copies of objects. So this is an important issue. Now, which brings me back to your title. You've got sustainable preservation. I would ditch the word preservation. It's too lacking in dynamism. Preservation, we've stopped talking in the English language about preservation. It implies that you can keep things like this here, we just keep it like that. Well, we know that all heritage is dynamic. Dynamic for all kinds of reasons. And I would, if you want to, I would use the word conservation, which has a much better theoretical and methodological underpinning. Preservation is too hard a term. It leaves you, it's inflexible, and doesn't raise enough debates. So I would forget preservation, just forget it, and go with literature where people have increasingly talking for the last 20 years about conservation rather than, and conservation itself is a theoretically very, very important area because different cultures have different ideas about what is worth conserving and how you conserve it. To give you an example, there are many traditional forms of conservation in Indonesia. When these objects from Indonesia go to a museum in the West, Western museums do know these traditional forms of conservation, so the objects don't get conserved properly. Well, rather, they don't make use of traditional knowledge from Indonesia. For example, take a kris. Indonesians know how to look after a kris blade very, very well. They have all kinds of techniques. They use oil, they use citrus, and they look after kris blades. And you often find that kris blades ending up in a Western museum end up not being well looked after because people don't understand them so well. And also, remember, it's expensive. You know, museums have too many objects. So it's, difficult to conserve. I would also spend a little bit more time talking about cultural tourism. Again, from a theoretical point of view, because it is not clear. People think that there is something called a cultural tourist. No, there isn't. There's cultural tourism as an activity, but tourists do all kinds of things. Tourists may go and watch. Give you an example. I'm sure you've all heard of Manchester's football teams from England, the Premier League. Yeah? When Manchester United plays at home, the city is full. People come from all over the world and they come to watch football. But what also happens is the museums and art galleries are busy because football supporters, actually, when the game is over, they're in Manchester, which has lots and lots of art galleries. They go and they eat in restaurants. They go to the exhibitions. They go shopping. Of course, we all love shopping. And so, you could say, and so for years, people were talking about sport tourists until I pointed out the sport tourists actually go to museums. Not all of them, but a big Premier League player like Manchester, those people who are supporters are often very well educated and very wealthy. So they engage in a multiplicity of activities. So I think you need to have a little bit of a discussion on what cultural tourism is about, because it is not, so there will of course be tourists who do go around looking at cultural things. But for example, even me, I'm a pretty solid cultural tourist, as it were. But when I come to Indonesia, I'm also interested in the Indonesian environment, the animal life, the plant life. Because look at my breakfast this morning. You know, I just thought, wow, it's amazing what you can have for breakfast in Java. It's a beautiful range of things. So I'm very interested in the biodiversity. So again, you want to say that people engage in a variety of activities, and that makes the understanding things rather more difficult. So, what else have I written? Yeah, I would also think about this. This workshop is about strategies for publishing in international journals. For whatever reason, international journals do not seem to like desk research and literature reviews very much. Now, this, I think, is faulty thinking. Prefer a case study with a clear methodology, some clear field work, and whatever. So beginning, middle, end. Something more conceptual like you're proposing, a lot of journals, so you might have to look not to a heritage journal, perhaps, or even a tourism journal. You might try talking to the International Journal of Heritage Studies to see whether they would. I would check back on that journal to see whether they've accepted conceptual pieces. If they don't do much, you might go to a more conceptual journal, you know, because I think it's wrong that that desk research and literature reviews should find it more difficult to get published. I have written things which have been exactly this kind of conceptual work, which have had more impact than some of the very clever studies I've done on one site with lots of statistics, lots of analysis. In fact, some rather more conceptual, thoughtful pieces, and also they cross borders easily. So some of my papers have been translated into Chinese because they are actually concepts and people are engaging with them. So you need to think also about the whole business of translation. Very interesting hearing you speaking in Indonesian and English, because as you know, the language never does quite match. Yeah. So that's all I say, but I think it's very interesting and I hope that was useful for you. And it's something which I'm personally very interested in. So I encourage you to go forward and hope that you can get published. But certainly I would start looking up look at the history of the World Heritage Convention and the critics of it, because I think that will give you a platform on which to base your digital work. So thank you very much for that. So we go on to the next.
Thank you.
My pleasure. So who is not one? Okay.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, Prof. Michael. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Nia. You can Kurnia Widyasuti. You can call me Nia. This is my paper, my first paper actually, and the title is Defining Experimental Pragmatism: Insight for Architecture Context and the Future. Actually, I have earlier newer version of this paper, but it hasn't done yet. So I might try to present the previous version.
since it's also the finding is not quite different. I want to talk with Indonesian, but I'm very fast talker. So pardon me if I use gado-gado bahasa Inggris and Indonesia. And I'm almost similar to Pak Uut. This is my senior. This is I think this is also a desk research, but actually I choose these topics is because very intrigue me so much. This is one of my topics in architecture theory lessons in my master study. So I get professional architecture master course. So this dissertation is my this doctoral study is my first time studying research methods and everything. This term is taught by my lecturer there, but when I try to find literature, so when I try to teach this to my student, there was very few of them. So I try to take this as my big question in pursuing this doctoral study. And at first, my supervisor suggests me to choose an architect case, so it calls MVRDV, architect MVRDV. It's the Dutch architect. But then when I try to dig deeper using content analysis study in the research, I find big questions. I haven't found the very nature or definition of the term of experimental pragmatism hasn't strong yet. So I moved back and try to find more literature. So this paper studied 22 papers, but then I dig deeper and get 50 paper, but this time I will present the 22 paper. Sorry. So the issue I introduce this issue by mentioning the complexity of the present and future has posed challenge towards every discipline. So the context is maybe pandemic or anything. Architecture has become something that maybe cannot keep up with the development of change in the world. So it's a very great concern when we get the past pandemic, because everything we know about architecture standard has changed, and we don't know whether we teach the student it is true, because after pandemic we cannot be normal again, and for that it's many things that we found. So I try to relate experimental pragmatism in this issue, and I also get some reference that state other art or design-based fields is also facing same problem. So we tend to stop in the form and space or two-dimensional or three-dimensional world, while the world has become, maybe like Pak Uut said, it's digital and everything's become complicated, and we also in two world, and I think this Dutch architect Meccano MVRDV, which are related to experimental pragmatism, can answer this challenge using their paradigm. And I hope that this study will help architect or maybe larger context to know what kind of paradigm we should use to face this. And the method is actually I try to do literature research at first, literature studies, but then from the 50, 22 and 50 papers, there's only few papers who talk about experimental pragmatism outside philosophy context. So actually, experimental pragmatism origins from philosophy context. So it's Dewey pragmatism, or in the educational field, it's called instrumental pragmatism. But I found reference that say that both terms are similar. Actually, this term is more preferred by Dewey, the philosopher, but he decided to let others or people say use the instrumental pragmatism. So it maybe has a relation with the educational context too. And then the what I found in a book about mechano architect in 2007, published in 2007, that titled Mechano Experimental Pragmatism of Mechano. So it has been what is called absorbed by architecture field in 2007, but after that there is no more publication in architecture. The most of reference paper books use this term like a jargon. Is that an English term? Jargon. Jargon. Oh, yes, okay, it's English term. Yeah, it's a jargon. So they use that in different terms. So I expand my search in the all kind of field that says anything about this term, and understanding the text of how they use that. So I copy the paragraphs containing the term, and then the paragraph and after the paragraph. So it should prevent any misunderstanding. And so this paper from the literature reference, and I changed that into more like thematic analysis, or maybe also if I can use desk research. Thank you for the previous suggestion. So maybe I can use that also. Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. The finding of this paper has 3 things other than experimental pragmatism for as a philosophy. So the first one is tools for decision making, and then experience-oriented action, and also refer to attitude to favor public interest. And then I try to add some context of this finding into architecture and what might we relate to future of architecture. And I rephrase these 3 findings into the 3 contextual statement. The first one is strategic intervention in the network of decision making and problem solving. So it's paraphrasing for tools for decision making. And the second one is learning by doing process. It's quite relevant with the last of my examination. So we find that maybe it's architecture, but not a style, but maybe it's a kind of a method of learning, design as learning. And then the last is innovation system or tool for designing purposeful change for the benefit of human and society. Then this paradigm has proposed maybe it's a change in the ontology of architecture, which form and space, into a system-oriented level. So it's a kind of abstract. So the design they create is, they declare that their design has no style. and they prefer to solve problem. It's urban problem or humanity problem, sustainability problem, dan lain, etc. Yes, and it might pose a vital role in anticipating the future without relying on past knowledge. Maybe it's yeah. Okay, and then in the introduction, okay, ya. Berapa menit? Masih berapa menit? Masih oke. Ya, let me to bahasa Indonesia. Let me know if I'm also too fast. Pada pengantar saya membuka dengan isu pandemik dan digital age, dan kemudian pentingnya bisa bisa survive dalam uncertainty dengan menemukan cara untuk mengatasi kompleksitas dan komplikasi dari masa kini dan masa depan. Kemudian saya menemukan bahwa ada istilah unknown future dari bidang pendidikan dari Barnett 2004 yang menunjukkan bahwa kunci untuk bisa menghadapi masa depan itu adalah justru kembali ke wisdom atau mungkin lebih karakter gitu ya. Dan itu kemudian membuat saya agak cemas gitu ya, karena kok jadi disertasinya bergeser ke arah yang mungkin di luar ontologi gitu, tapi sejauh ini dari sidang masih didukung gitu ya. Nah, kemudian saya menyajikan juga bahwa ada dari JC gitu ya, yang menyatakan juga ini yang tadi saya tulis, saya sampaikan bahwa dalam ini bidang Davis ini berasal dari bidang desain grafis kalau nggak salah ya. Jadi menunjukkan bahwa fenomena bahwa perlunya bergeser komunitas desain itu dari berpikir produk dan komponen ke arah system of interrelated product dan communities composed of interactive system. So itu mungkin lebih kompleks dari sekedar form and space, dan semoga ini menjadi pesan yang bisa jadi novelty dari riset ini. Ya, kemudian saya jelaskan sedikit tentang MVDV dan MVDV arsitek, yang contoh arsiteknya, dan ada paper yang menyebutkan juga tentang bahwa arsitek ini berbicara di aspek sistem gitu ya, bukan hanya form and space. Dan kemudian untuk pertanyaan, pada sebelum studi ini juga saya pernah melakukan konten analisis, tapi hanya istilah-istilah dari kamus dan menemukan sedikit teori yang di konten analisis itu ada 3 tema juga. Tujuan, bahwa eksperimental pragmatisme itu terkait dengan tujuan, metode, dan hasil. Nah, oke. Nah, untuk metodenya ini konten analisis ya, mungkin teman-teman sudah tahu semua. Nah, di sini menjelaskan tentang ini gaya seperti menjelaskan tentang systematic literature review, tapi di akhir kemudian jadinya thematic analysis. Jadi ada awalnya ada 97 publikasi, kemudian di akhir kemudian menemukan kita sortir jadi 22 publikasi. Kemudian saya simulasikan ini grafiknya gitu ya, kemunculan banyak istilah itu di literatur itu di tahun berapa saja, dimulai dari mungkin 5-6 gitu ya, kemudian bertambah gitu. Yang biru ini yang menyebutkan term eksperimental dan praktisme tidak secara bersamaan dalam satu frase, tapi kalau yang orange itu yang menyebutkan istilahnya itu bersama dalam satu frase. Ya, sampai di sini itu kemudian bertambah, itu ada trennya. Ya, kemudian saya juga sajikan sebaran kemunculan paper-paper tersebut di 22 paper itu. Misalnya ini dari sains yang umum, kemudian biologi, toksikologi, itu ada cukup banyak, itu hard science ternyata banyak menggunakan experimental pragmatism. Kemudian filosofi pendidikan, teologi, sains, itu juga cukup banyak. Kemudian diikuti IT dan government, arsitektur ada 2, kemudian hukum ada 3, histori atau sejarah ada 1. Seperti itu. Kemudian saya sajikan kedua 22 literatur ini, sementara sebenarnya juga ada pertanyaan nanti kalau misalnya saya sudah mengekspand menjadi 50 paper, bagaimana menyajikannya, ini juga masih saya pikirkan. Seperti ini, kemudian memudahkan presentasi ini saya coba summary dalam ini ya, bagaimana menemukan tema 3 itu. Awalnya ini misalnya ada kode atau subtem seperti bahwa experimental pragmatism itu digunakan sebagai kriteria untuk memvalidasi kebenaran dan ilmu pengetahuan, kemudian skeptical idealism, sisi inovatif untuk konflik antara dua pihak, kemudian ada terkait dengan karakter salah satu filosofer, itu ya, logika dan etika. Jadi di bagian ini banyak sekali ternyata experimental pragmatism itu bicara tentang bagaimana memediasi konflik antara dua hal yang bertolak belakang gitu. Mungkin karena diawali juga pragmatisme itu kan diawali kalau di filosofi ilmu pengetahuan itu di era di mana agama atau mungkin gereja kalau di barat itu bisa tidak lagi berkonflik dengan ilmu pengetahuan gitu, dan pragmatisme ini menjadi salah satu solusi yang ditawarkan 3 filosofer itu untuk agar ini tuh tidak jadi satu konflik, ya harus punya harus tetap sains itu harus maju tapi punya etika moral seperti yang dibawakan di agama gitu. Nah, gitu. Jadi kemudian juga kriteria-kriteria untuk menilai sesuatu gitu, misalnya dalam penelitian itu ada yang tidak jelas, kemudian improvisasi yang dilakukan oleh para peneliti itu mereka sebut sebagai experimental pragmatism. Nah, ini jadi kemudian dijadikan 3 tema ini menjadi 3 prototip ini menjadi tema besar alat untuk mengambil keputusan. Kemudian yang tema yang kedua itu dihasilkan tema yang kedua yaitu experience and experiment oriented action, itu diawali dari beberapa kode atau prototip tema gitu ya, learning by doing gitu. Kadang jadi istilah ini dipakai untuk menunjukkan satu usaha untuk learning by doing, kemudian lebih juga menunjukkan preferensi terhadap praktek dibandingkan ideologi atau teori, kemudian juga menunjukkan improvisasi, inovasi, menunjukkan eksperimen yang sukses gitu ya, kemudian solusi yang out of the box dan ide baru. Jadi semacam membutuhkan ide menunjukkan bahwa ini tidak sekedar kreatif atau punya ide baru, tapi tekanannya adalah lebih menciptakan sesuatu yang belum ada referensinya atau punya lompatan kreativitas. Kemudian yang terakhir tema purpose oriented atau berisi tujuan, ini nampaknya paling sedikit tapi cukup intensnya cukup kuat. Oh ya, oke. Yaitu dalam ada 2 hal gitu. Jadi mengutamakan kepentingan publik, juga menunjukkan satu eksperimen yang sukses gitu. Ya, ini tidak bisa detail ya, ada beberapa teks-teks yang menjelaskan kutipan-kutipan, contoh-contoh dari hard science, tapi mungkin kalau saya jelaskan akan membingungkan dari bidang lain. Nah, di akhir itu kemudian saya bahas beberapa referensi yang mendukung untuk bisa dibawa ke arsitektur konteks. Ya, mungkin itu dulu karena nanti kesimpulan tadi sudah saya jelaskan di depan. Kalau saya kembalikan, silakan Prof. Michael. Ya.
Thank you very much for that. Unlike the previous presentation, which is an area which I've been working in, this area is an area I don't work in. Okay, so forgive me if I can't comment on the sort of contemporary theoretical debates which I did with the previous presenter because he's working on World Heritage sites. So I've stuck to on process rather than on the actual content, because I think it would be cheeky of me to try and comment that I know something about this field of architecture, which I don't. So we now have the limitations of the reviewer. So we have the limitations of all kinds of things, but in this case, limitations of the reviewer. First of all, the first thing that struck me was you've got your title, Experimental Pragmatism, but all the time you seem to be also talking not just about experimental, but also experiential. Yeah, these are two, it's often very confusing for non-English, native English speakers that these two words sound so similar, but they actually have quite a different meaning. And I think that you're talking about both. I could be wrong, because you're talking, learning by doing is experiential. It's experience. If I'm right in hearing you on this, then I think that you might have a look at some of the literature on experiential education. How do you, because one of the ideas is that you learn much more if you experience it. And what's interesting from what I'm getting from this presentation is that architects are learning experientially. They may be experimenting, but the fact is an experiment is not quite the same thing. It's by the doing, the learning and the doing, I think is summed up in experiential. I think if I've got this wrong, then just ignore me, okay? But I think there's quite an interesting idea there, because I'm not sure that experiential learning is something that has really been talked about much in architecture. I could be wrong. So if that is the case, then I think it could, that's a very different, that's a very interesting angle. And of course, you make the point that architecture can't keep up with all the, the modern demands. Architecture has its limitations, and we have now so many demands to create architecture in different ways that we need to be experiential, because that's the only way we'll learn how to do things. Because we can't get the book out of the library. In fact, it's quite interesting. I've taught research methods before students, and students say, "Oh, was there a research methods book?" And I said, "I never go near them." They say, "Why is that?" I said, "Well, I'm all kind of modifying, inventing, changing, adapting methodologies. So if I read a book, it's always like, there it is. And I end up, from my own experience, always saying that I've changed it. And I think that's what you're doing. I think you're realizing that architecture has to modify, has to change. Now, the interesting thing is you go on about jargon, And I think you could have a very interesting literature review on that. What is meant by jargon? What are the lexical meanings that you refer to? Because sometimes jargon is unhelpful because it forces you into a way of thinking. So I would have a discussion perhaps in your dissertation on why jargon is problematic. It is useful. And also the difficult thing is the term jargon is automatically negative. And I'm thinking, does it have to be automatically negative? Is there another word which means the same as jargon, but is actually quite positive? I really don't know, because I've only just started thinking about listening to you this morning. So jargon is a very tricky thing because it'd be interesting to know what the architectural profession thinks of jargon. Is it inhibiting, or should we be using other terms? You talked about content analysis in a qualitative way, and immediately I thought, yes, but you can do content analysis in a quantitative way using software. And that software exists. Yeah. And Vivo, yeah. Now, you could probably use the software to get yourself a bigger picture. And so do content analysis from, if you want, both qualitative and quantitative, but I think at Vivo would certainly help. Now, this is something may surprise you. I have recently used software to do exactly what you've been doing, which is to show connections between different bodies of thinking. Now, there is some software available which will show you, well, if you do it the usual way by using some notes and using your brain, there is software now which will tell you that can look at literature and say which papers are connecting with each other. What are the clusters? What are the main debates? So it's not content analysis. It's really showing you the progress of ideas. And I've published a paper recently in this area. I did it for tourism, showing how people's perceptions of tourism research have been changing over a period of time. So I would have a look online and see if there is some sophisticated software which will help you to show how different bodies of thought connect or don't connect. Because I'm not saying that's the end result. You have to look at the data that you get and work out, and then follow it up yourself and work out whether it was useful. But it might save you time, because you're doing a lot of, I think you're doing a lot of basically comparing. And I think that kind of software will help you. So I think finally, I think you need perhaps to actually be very careful about experience and experiment. And it's just very awkward in the English language that if you listen to them, I first came across a debate about experiential learning in a big way, actually in Hong Kong and Macau. Most people there are speaking English with a Cantonese accent. Now, with a Cantonese accent, it's very hard to distinguish between experiential and experimental. And so we got into terrible muddle, because people would say experimental when they meant experiential, and experiential when they meant experimental. And I was going like, just hold on, guys. You know, they are two different words. It's just inconvenient. And I say, in any case, China's full of inconveniences. It's got lots of words which mean almost the same thing, but the Chinese word, no, it means something different. So I think you need maybe to spend a bit of time on definition. And because I think that is what you're talking about. You're talking about a combination of experiential learning and experimentation. The two often go hand in hand. And I'd be very interested to know if there's an architectural discipline kind of idea about all of this. Is there some overall thinking about the direction of architecture? There might not be actually, but I was just wondering whether that existed. So I couldn't really comment on the precise nature of your research, but I could comment on the sort of process. And I would say that when you, given the topic, when you come to write your conclusions, I would certainly flag up writing about the limitations of your research, because this kind of research is limited by a number of things. It's limited by the reality of the fact that architects have to deal with real world situations. And that's very different for me often, although I do deal with the real world because I work on museums and visitor management. That's pretty real. But a lot of what I write is not real. It's just well, interesting ideas. So limitations of research is the fact that it's very difficult when people are practitioners, which architects are. They often do not write down or do not have in any way a recording of quite why they did something. So one of the problems I think you've got, I could be wrong, expecting that as practitioners, there's a lot you don't see. And how you see that, I don't know. And also, architects often don't, remember, it's a very different skill. Architects are dealing with technology, they're dealing with visuals, they're dealing with aesthetics, and they're working very fast. And incidentally, I have actually worked in partnership with architects, and it's quite interesting because they often, when they listen to me, I'm a natural storyteller, and I find I'm sitting there, there's a bunch of architects already drawing something. When I'm speaking, they're drawing. Now, I'm thinking, what's going on there? They're trying to translate what I'm saying into some visual form, which I think is quite interesting. So yeah, I found that very interesting. I didn't have the competence really to go into depth, but I hope I made some useful comments there for you, because I just picked up those kinds of things. So it's not quite as much detail as I can give in response. I can only do so much. So limitations of the reviewer, okay? Do we want to take a coffee break? Good. Thank you very much. So we have a what, half an hour for coffee break? 10 minutes? Yeah, okay, we'll have a 10-minute coffee break. Okay, thank you.
Kembali tak pindah, oh iya. Apa? Yeah, it's very interesting. So I have a question.
Yeah, good.
What is the difference between learning by doing and trial and error? I think experience and experimental. Learning by doing and trial and error. Trial and error except experimental.
Yeah, I think okay, here we go. I think trial and error is an earlier stage. Because I think when you get to a professional stage, I think we're talking about experiential, because you already know a lot. Now, let's say I'm inventing the wheel, okay?
Yeah.
I like those cartoons of cavemen, you know?
Yeah.
It's square. It doesn't work. Not it was like that. Now that's trial and error, because you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Now, I think trial and error is a lot of human history, is trial and error. How do we make fire? How do we make it? And a a lot of advancements in human development are by trial and error. The classic story of the Chinese emperor and tea. He's sitting with his hot water, and the tea leaf falls in, and he's falling asleep, but he drinks the tea and he wakes up.
Yeah,
And also it's nice. Now that's trial and error.
right.
But I think, for example, if you take the history of dyes in Indonesia, Indonesia has a very complex system of dyes for its textiles. Now, I think these,
Yeah.
you will get some trial and error.
Yeah.
I have craftspeople who will, but mostly it's experiential learning because you
Yeah.
already know a lot.
And maybe there's any relation with resident study, president study, and case-based learning.
Yes, of course. Precedent study is Newton's classic. Newton, the great physicist.
Any relation with the trial and error and learning by doing?
No, it's slightly different. Newton basically said that we are pygmies standing on the shoulders of giants, which is why we can see so far. Because that's precedent. The precedent is the giant knows everything because the giant can see, but a pygmy climbs up the giant and stands on the giant's head. You can see even further. So yes, there's always precedent. The interesting thing is that any advance involves rule breaking, but you've got to have rules. So we have a style of batik, which evolved from, if you take the wax in the dyeing process, the wax cracked,
Yeah.
and this gives little tendrils of color. Now this is a mistake. However, batik makers, particularly in Yogyakarta and Surakarta, realized this could be made quite beautiful. So an error becomes an opportunity. Now that's not quite trial and error, but it is in a way.
Ibuku secepat kali sebenarnya.
Perhaps. Yeah. You know, if you're building a rocket,
Yeah.
because there's so much money in a space rocket,
Yeah.
you can't rely on trial and error.
Yeah.
It's too expensive. Yeah. And you know,
And once more,
yeah.
we have a case study
Case study,
with or apply this project.
Okay. Now,
It's different.
yes, I'm a little bit skeptical. Because I've encountered this case study methodology in China.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems is you need to be very careful, because if you're trying to publish in an international journal, they won't understand it and they will find fault with it. Because in China, it's actually used as quite a descriptive form of research rather than an analytical form of research. And so you get a lot of Chinese academics writing case study analysis, but they don't do the analysis, they just write the case study. Yeah, so you've always got to have analysis in there somewhere. So no problem with case study, but I'd be careful because I've looked, many people give me papers based on case study approach, and I go, yeah, but it's not transferable very easily. You can see in its internal consequences what it is. Then you say, so what?
How about the experience that, yeah, maybe that I have the experiences and what his result is other said it's a good something.
Is it what, sorry?
No, I mean the experience of design.
Yeah.
Other person have result for this project is a good, quote unquote.
Yes.
So how about the case study about successful for this? Yeah. So not for the
Okay, I think
product, but the process.
I think you're getting what's the word? You're getting too bothered about something you shouldn't be too bothered about. A case study is just a case study. That's it.
Yeah.
Now, turning a case study into a method case studies can be understood by lots of different methods. The reason I'm answering like I do is because in China and a lot of other countries, they have this thing called case study method. No such thing exists. A case study exists, but a case study can be analyzed with lots of different methods. But there's no such thing as a case study method. And I've tried to explain this to vast numbers. I also remember I'm a referee for journals. And
maybe Indonesian, yeah. In Indonesia.
Yeah,
okay.
go on.
Studi kasus keberhasilan proyek pelestarian. Jadi ada proyek pelestarian yang dinilai oleh masyarakat sebagai sebuah keberhasilan. And then, how about keberhasilan? So, studi kasus keberhasilan. Yeah, this is something behind of the project.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think
It's possibility for method.
it's not a method, it's an approach.
Approach.
Yeah, it's an approach. It's not a method. It's just a way of, I would say that you still need to apply a method. It's an approach.
Yeah.
So I would still see that on top of that, you need to find a methodology which brings it out, and that could be many. It's also, if you're using a concept which is used in, for example, there's a whole bunch of educational learning concepts in Indonesia, which nobody outside of Indonesia understands. Okay. Now, the only way you're going to get, if you do this in a publication, the only way you're going to have to do it is to explain every little bit of it. Yeah, because no one understands. I can't remember what it was one I was using in Bali, where they think it's quite normal. And they said there's no translation. And I said, well, yes, there's no translation. So, end of. So that journal is not going to take it. You can't translate everything. So you have to explain it. Yeah. I've had some very, no, sorry. I've had some very amusing experiences, you know. There are things which seem very obvious to Indonesians, which the rest of the world is going like, and yes, it's a bit like certain food tastes. Every culture has a food taste that the rest of the world goes, and why? So like Southern Chinese love to suck on the feet of chicken. Well, I personally just think, okay, these are all my friends. Oh yes, please. Yeah. These are all my friends. So if they're going to eat chicken's feet, I'm going to eat chicken's feet. I'm going to do as many sauces as possible to make it taste of something. Because to me, they don't taste of anything.
I know a Dutch friend who use sambal, sambal, Indonesian sambal as a sandwich filling, which is very, very too much for Indonesian.
2 days ago, I was doing a presentation at Stupa.
Yeah.
Yes, and someone brought in a very nice durian,
Oh, you like the
of course. Then we were eating the durian, and we were all talking about which way we like to eat durian. Which makes everybody laugh. I said, you know what? I like durian on toast. Yes, I know.
How in the pan or
No,
in the
no,
oven?
you put the toast in the toaster, then you take the flesh of the durian and smear it on the toast.
So it's a whole durian on the
No, not durian, just one fruit. Just take the skin off, with flesh. Then you have your toast from the toaster. Easy. There, and then get your knife. And put it up. Now it's nice because
I think it's a nice recipe. I should try one.
yeah, it's got the nice crunchiness of the toast. Now durian, if you eat it with your hands, it's very sticky.
Yeah.
But if you put it on toast, it's not sticky. You have nice crunchiness in the toast.
How long do you toast the durian?
Sorry, how?
How long do you toast the durian?
You have to toast with the durian cold on the toast. You can toast the durian if you want, but durian doesn't toast very well.
Yeah.
So
How do you do? So you extract the flesh, right?
yeah, take the flesh off, and then you just butter it, like treat it like butter.
Oh, I see.
Because-
Oh, you mean toast is
It's the
the
bread.
bread. So in my mind it's a toaster or
No, it's durian on toast.
I think
It's lovely. It's lovely.
pakai gula nggak? Pakai gula nggak? Nggak.
Yeah, it actually tastes really nice.
I can imagine that. But we never think of that.
No, but I come from a culture where people do lots of things with toast. So
Yeah, very creative.
So
way to-
there's my wife and me living in Indonesia. We both like durian. We both like toast. So we think, okay, why don't we try putting durian on toast?
So it's an experimental pragmatism.
Then we go to Bali and realize that the Balinese, who are very smart entrepreneurs in terms of tourism, they've already discovered this. So in Bali now you can get durian on toast. And, yeah. I love to like durian ice cream.
Oh yeah, it's delicious.
Yes, lovely durian ice cream. So I like durian. I like durian on toast and I like durian ice cream. It's very nice.
Professor, can I ask you something?
Yeah, go on.
On your article which doing mix content analysis. What is the title?
I don't have it with me. What you need to do is to email me.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I don't have it here.